You are watching CIOTV by Enterprise IT World, a production of Accent Info Media.
The business today are enabled or run by technology, right? That's a platform, right? What we do is build solutions on top of that that can help the business. So if you start focusing on what the customer needs are, right, and then you start developing solutions, products, and presenting that to the management, it makes a lot of sense.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to CIOTV.live, a production of Accent Info Media. Today, my guest is Shafique Ibrahim, CDIO, Chief Digital Information Officer, Fardan Group, UAE. To give you an introduction, he has an illustrious career of 20 years. Mr. Shafique is a qualified, tenacious digital professional, and he is into finance and retail sector. He has worked with several banks, finance institutes globally, partnered with fintech and startups to enable payment services. In addition to this, he is member, advisor, and speaker at various blockchain, fintech, and payment forums with the ability to lead, plan, and coordinate best practices and procedures to bring significant improvements in business process using innovative technology and successfully achieving business goals. In his illustrious career, he has also received multiple accolades, including the most recent Enterprise IT MEA Award of COVID-19 Superhero. He has also received the award of CIO 500 in the past. He is also a member of Foreign Exchange and Remittance Group, IT Subcommittee, and a member of Blockchain Consortium. Mr. Shafique, good afternoon and welcome to you to CIOTV.live.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. That was a very rich introduction. I mean, really appreciate that. And for me, it's a good morning. So that is one of the things that we have nowadays, like time difference. So good afternoon to you, and good morning to the people around me.
Good morning and good afternoon both. So my first question is, over the years, BFSI, fintech industry have evolved. How do you see the foreign exchange and remittance industry is also evolving? Because you belong to that industry, you represent IT in a reputed, remittance or foreign exchange organization out of UAE.
Right. I mean, if we talk about evolving, yes. I mean, every industry is going through a change, going through a transformation, and remittance and foreign exchange is no escape from that. So definitely, this is something. But then, if you step back a bit, if you try to analyze, and honestly speaking, you have to see who's evolving. Is it the business or the customers? And that's a key thing to really understand. And I personally believe it's not the business, it's not the financial institutes or the payments that's evolving. I think it's the customer who's evolving, right? Customer is getting used to certain digital platforms, and they would want to have the services on their fingertips. And this is where the whole evolution is happening, right? So if I just look back a couple of 50 years back, if you say, right, ATM was launched 50 years back, right? That was one of the big bang launch that we did, from the banking sector. And in 50 years, what has changed in ATMs? Think about it, right? We still do balance inquiry, we still do cash withdrawals, and few services in there. But then we have not really, evolved from what we had as an innovation back then. But then the moment the customers started getting onto their mobile phone and having services on their digital platforms, we started following customers to where they want to. And that's where the whole evolution is right? And that's what I believe. And again, for remittances, same thing. The customers are moving towards the digital platforms. Earlier they used to walk to your branches using the legs. Then they started using the labs with laptops and fingers. And now it's all on the voice. So the evolution is towards voice. And then as a payment, as a remittances, we are focusing that. So we being a very, a customer-centric exchange house, or an exchange house, we are moving towards that. But at the same time, there's a huge competition as well. And I'm talking about exchange houses within the industry that I am in right now. So earlier it was like, when you talk about remittances, it used to be exchange houses only. But now you have banks, you have fintechs, and you have your own traditional, modes that are there, right? So there has to be a change that has to be evolving. Now, from exchange remittances house, yes, okay, we are moving towards digital platform. We're going to mobile, we're going to social media transactions, and that's a change that's happening, but that's on the front end. But at the same time, there's a lot of change that's happening at the back end, which we as Exchange House leverage on, which is, our relationship with the correspondent banks globally. This is something that we as Exchange House benefit from, which others probably are in the initial phase of adopting, right? So for us, monetizing on the APIs that we have with the banks, that's one change, that's one evolution that's coming up. We're highly involved in that. And as I said, we work with fintechs and startup. That's the area that we work with, where we enable fintechs and startups to use remittance engine, through the open APIs that we have built. That's one change. We are also working on the customer interactions in terms of going digital, going social, so not only providing services on the mobile apps, but going one step ahead and looking into other channels which the customers are utilizing. So there's a huge shift that's happening. Of course, we're looking at the blockchain and the crypto, but that's going to take some time, I personally believe. But the quick win for this year and the change that we're looking at are these.
Now, it used to be core banking always at the beginning, then the remittance industry. Now is the digital banking. So one after another, from the core banking, all the companies are becoming partners. Now, remittance industry and the core banking, I mean the payment banks or fintech industries are becoming OEMs for the banks also. There is a crisscross of relationship. The rules or the country specific compliances, that is need to be changed. Is it changing? Number one. Number two is that in order to elevate your services, you need a cloud computing, where the banking or fintech industry, traditional industry are not so comfortable with. They don't want to, host their applications or host their database into the cloud computing. Unless you have cloud, unless you have you go into the RPA kind of technology, you are not able to make yourself flexible in order to service the customers and bring in that customer satisfaction. So what is happening in the industry? One side you said that yes, customer is driving the evolution, driving the change. The other side is that regulations, compliances.
All right. So two things and very, very valid points, Sanjay, that you raised. One is the regulations, and the other one is the innovation in terms of technology, right? Now, in terms of regulations, yes, there are changes in regulations, and we have seen that. In some countries, it's slow, but in some countries, the adoption is faster, right? In UAE, I believe we are adopting to new technologies. We have entities or organizations like ADGM and Dubai Fintech Hive working very closely with central banks, in terms of bringing a change in the regulations, making sure that the digital aspect is incorporated into the regulations, right? So that is happening. That's in progress. In fact, 1.5 years back, we were working on a eKYC on a blockchain, right? Along with something that was along with ADGM that we did, and it was presented to central bank, for their approval. So that's also in progress. So there are changes, right? And these changes are must, because on one side we're talking about digital transformation and we're talking about serving customers digitally, but then that has to be aligned with the regulations as well. So, for example, if the regulation says that the customer onboarding has to be through physical verification, then that defeats the purpose of the digital onboarding, which means the customer has to be face-to-face verified. But then, on the other hand, we do have a platform where we can do eKYC. We can identify where the customer is right now. Okay, whether it's a real picture, we can get his ID, we can match that. So these platforms are there, which the regulators are looking into, and I believe some countries they have already approved, and some countries are in the final stage of approving that. So that's on the regulation side, and that's happening. And of course, we need to respect that. And the way we look at the customers and want to serve them, regulators have more responsibilities, to not only serve the customers but to serve the country as well. So there's another responsibility. Now, in terms of technology, yes, on the cloud front, you're right. Sometimes legacy systems or legacy structure is very difficult to change, right? And that's where the strategy comes in place. You don't have to really change overnight things. We need to collaborate, and this is where it is. So if you ask someone to just go and change the system which was running for past 20 years and do it, it's not going to happen. And if you want to do that, it's going to take another 2 or 3 years to do so, right? And that's not the ideal way of doing it. So personally, I would just go into microservices right now, identify things and start developing around that rather than change the whole thing. Cloud adoption is very important. And that's one of the strategies that I had last year. and we are aggressively working on that. For me, the cloud first strategy has been in place, has been approved, and everything that we look at today is cloud. All right. Having said this thing, I still have a legacy system. But then, do I need to add or incorporate everything new I do on the legacy system? Maybe not. Right. So that's one thing. So cloud, it's on the cloud. We're trying to make best use of that. We're looking at hybrid model. That's more of a distributed cloud rather. So I have something on a private cloud. Then there's a public cloud that's there, right? Other thing is a focus in terms of how you see cloud. It's also very, very important, right? Cloud is not just putting your workload on the cloud. That's not the real thing, right? There's a value that you need to create out of cloud. How are you interacting with the customers, right? What value, the ROI that you create, and the really important thing is your own resources, right? So today I have a team of IT, okay, who were working on the infrastructure. But the idea is, do you want your resources to work on technology where somebody else can do better than what you do, all right? And why don't you use your resources to enable business, right? I mean, and that's where it is, right? Give the computing part to somebody who can do it better, who can monitor 24/7 for SOC and NOC, and all. Get your resources and focus more on digital aspect of it, on working closely with the business, and that's what it is. So that's something. On the RPA front, it is something I think COVID has initiated that in a big scale of what do you call, so you don't have to educate the senior management what RPA is. The value is known and adoption is faster. And I believe, for me, I'm also working on an RPA project. We are the final stage, so that is something that's going on. On a blockchain, if you talk about on a blockchain, we have been talking about this for years and years, and being a member of a few consortiums and working closely with a couple of other banks and all. It's going to take some time, my personal opinion is, one is either it has to be regulated by a regulatory body. So the example I said, eKYC on the blockchain, a very beautiful example of that, right? But will a banks do it, or will a financial institution do it? It doesn't make sense. The moment the regulator comes on board and says, this is how I want to do it, it'll be adopted. It adds value, right? Second thing is the customer. Does the customer really care of what technology do you use? Actually, they don't. Customer cares about the UI UX that they see on the mobile app. They don't care about what backend technology is. And most of the time, we end up confusing customers, they're using blockchain. I said, okay, fine, you're using blockchain, great. For a customer, the blockchain is cryptocurrency. End of story, right? So this is where it is. So I think we need to be more careful on what we do, what value that we create. As a CIO, the role is to serve the customer, to serve the business, at the same time, reduce the cost, the ROI part of it, right? And that's where the new technology, the new collaborations come in place. So just to answer these two things, this is how we look at. But yes, there's a change in the industry.
All right. Now coming to your own organization, Fardan Group, which is into multiple businesses, starting from, I think exchange is the oldest one, if I say so. It starts from 70s, then the jewelry business, then properties, hospitality, automotive rather, investment and marine services as well. So you have been handling it very efficiently in an entire group, a group of the companies. COVID-19, when the onset happened, it have brought in its natural challenges for everybody. Some CIOs or some people bogged down, but you didn't. People like you also, they didn't. They managed, monitored it properly. So what was the kind of strategy that you adopted? Did you have any sense that it is coming so quickly to you, and in the sense that to the reason that your organization will be affected? Or what was your strategy? You had started the digital transformation, the journey you had already traversed, and it didn't have an impact on your overall strategy at all, whether it is COVID or non-COVID.
Before COVID, the way our organization works, and I said more of a customer centric, so Fardan Exchange has been very customer centric, focusing what the customer needs. And we used to also go beyond branches. That means we used to have a mobile team going to the sites, serving the customers, because we serve laborers and who stay in the camps, right? And for that one, our team really goes all the way to the camps, to serve them, the salaries and remittances and all. So we had a framework in place for remote working, and we used to call it more like mobility. So that was a framework that we had. Now, the moment, it was asked that everyone wants to work from home, it was mainly around scaling up, in terms of the bandwidth that we need to have to serve the rest of the employees to work from home. So that really kind of helped us to, so we were prepared, but not with COVID, but we were prepared with the mobility, right, and remote working. And that really helped us to kind of adopt to that quick change. So within 2 days time, we were able to kind of acquire new laptops, configure them, and then just roll it out to the employees, right? So we did not go for, let's say, employee can use their own devices. We didn't do that one. Why? Because, of course, we could have saved cost and time, but then we would have exposed ourselves to another risk, which is a cybersecurity end, because we don't know what kind of endpoint that they use. So what we did was we just got this endpoints, rolled it out to everyone, and you won't believe we had 100% back office working from home, and we were pretty good with that, right? So of course we had a team to monitor, and that was done. Our branches were open during the COVID as well, because as the exchange house remittances was considered as a critical service, so we got approval that we can have the branches open. So the few of the members used to work from the branches, but the back office was 100% working from home. Now they're getting back to work, at a certain percentage, but we were able to do that. Again, it was a strategy that was set, and it's very important, because it's important to understand. And so business continuity was one subject. It was always there, right? But then the COVID was a real life, a test scenario to just say, okay, fine, you were talking about business continuity, let's test it. So some of them, they got through, some of them, they couldn't. Of course, most of them did, but some were able to do it earlier and some could do it later. But then that was a real drill for the business continuity that was triggered by the COVID.
So part of the business continuity is security. So you must have seen that how many banks have been attacked, how many large organizations, big consulting companies who used to give consulting to the big 100 or big 500 companies have been attacked severely, and ransom have been asked for. So that has not happened. I believe, I assume that has not happened with you, and God forbid that doesn't happen with you or any of the organization within in the region. So what was your security strategy which enabled that your work from home offices, or the people, even on-premise people or branch offices, are immune from all those kinds of attacks, or from the bad eyes?
Well, financial institutes are always under those bad eyes, as you say, right? So, and then what we have seen, like during the COVID, there was a huge surge in the attacks, especially in Middle East. We have seen the number of attacks, I think, went to 300 700% increase.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right now, but it was huge. Right now, what happens to a simple fact, right? Something that you do as planned, you're prepared for it, right? But something that you do in a rush, you end up compromising. You always leave some gaps in between, right? So those banks or the institutes, who have this mobility or remote working environment, they were prepared. They knew what's required to have in place, right, in terms of security also. But imagine, overnight you're asked to do something you have not done before, you're not prepared for it, and you want the business to run. And there's always a balance that you need to maintain between business, revenue, customers, and then the risk, right? And the moment you have a pressure saying that, we're going to lose business if we don't do this, and you do things in rush, then you end up compromising. So your focus is more on enabling it rather than securing it, right? So you enable and then you secure it. And this gap in between, leads to a lot of compromises. Now that could be internal compromise. It doesn't have to be a hacker from outside, but it could be internal, or of course it could be external, right? So this is where it is. So those who are prepared with the mobility, who are prepared with remote working, I wouldn't say they're 100% safe. There's nobody 100% safe anymore, right? It's just that, okay, fine, they could mitigate the risk compared to others, right? Attacks are there, and even today, if I sit back over here and say, no, I wasn't attacked, probably, I don't know whether there's an attack in my, these things, or maybe I'll come to know. But it's just we cannot avoid the fact that anybody could be attacked, right? This is one thing. Of course, we are monitoring it. Alhamdulillah, so far, we didn't get into any kind of surprises, and God forbid we don't need to.
Yes.
So, yeah, but yeah, it's been a good journey so far. We were able to kind of overcome, COVID or pandemic issues to a certain extent, and we are still looking forward for things to settle down completely.
Okay, what percentage of your workers are working from home? Are you planning to put them permanently working from home, or you will bring them into your premise? What is your plan like?
Our employees, back office employees, were all 100% working from home, and now we are getting back to the office 30%. So Dubai is declared that we are safe and things are getting back to normal. Though yesterday's news was the numbers are increasing. So I don't know what how the coming days will be. But as of now, we have 30 to 50% people working from home. Again, it was a learning, and it was a test rather. A test to see how productive are we when we're working from home. So we have done a couple of surveys internally to see what people prefer. Do they prefer to work from home? Do they prefer to work from office? Or they want to, kind of have a mix of both? But then, I mean, what we've noticed is the productivity has increased, So one of the reasons for productivity increase, I would say, is like there's no start and end day. When you're working from home, I remember getting calls at 10 o'clock at night and people are working. So I believe right now we are being very flexible, to be honest, so till the end of the year, we'll be flexible, so yes, if somebody wants to work from home and they can, then why not let them work from home, right? But we'll monitor the situation as well and decide towards the end of the year, we'll get some assistance from the government also, to kind of, see, should we make it 100%, should we make it 50%? So yeah.
Right, absolutely. So of late, I think very recently, I learned that you have adopted a public cloud. I mean, I don't know how far that is true or not. Was there any requirement? What was your requirement? What was your challenge? Very quickly, if you can tell me, what was the need of going to public cloud, which you would have otherwise developed the capability within your organization. You of course said something about going into cloud, the advantages of cloud. But for you, for Al Fardan Group Exchange business, what is the need of, if you can, maybe few minutes you can.
Few things, right? I mean, first of all, my whole infrastructure, I'm moving into private cloud. I'm not moving into private cloud, right? Because there are some government regulations wherein my
not public cloud.
No, I have to. So one is my complete production and DR side, which is the part of the business, right? Moving that into a private cloud, which means getting it out of my team.
I know.
So that's done, and that's within the UAE, right? Then at the same, and why this is because of the strategy that we have. We have certain digital strategies, quick go-to-marketing strategies and all. Now, if I have things within my, lean team, then what happens? It takes time. So there's a capex that's involved. There's a team resource that's involved and all. But the moment I do a private cloud, first of all, I don't have to worry about the 24/7 monitoring. In terms of knock and SOC, that's been taken care of. I can upscale anytime. That's one thing. On the other side, on the public cloud, I'm leveraging on Azure, which is in UAE right now, and that's one of the requirements, right? So for my secure hosting, or let's say public-facing websites and all, I'm putting it on Azure cloud. So it's more of a hybrid, right? Or rather a distributed cloud environment that I'm looking for. And the whole strategy was to focus more on business than to focus on technology. So the thing is, I want a team not to look at the server lights, whether they're green or red. Rather look at the business, how we can enable that. I mean, rather work on RPAs, automations, data analytics and all. That's where the business value is, right? And so guys focus on this rather than focusing on the infrastructure. And that's where it is. See, the technology is going through a lot of changes, right? And it's always good to give it to somebody who could do better than what I do, right? I'd rather upskill my team in innovative technology or not technology, other solutions, than focusing on the servers and operating systems, and all that. So this is all the strategy was. So yeah, and of course the ROI, it's clearly
got it. Yeah. Now you said RPA and analytics. Are you looking at the customer satisfaction front that you will be implementing or working on, or the backend? Of course, that leads to the customer satisfaction. But then there are certain projects which are directly proportionate with customer satisfaction. Front end things you are doing. Some you are doing at the back end. Some RPA implementation, so that processes need to be automated, so that the manually you need to do anything, you can devote that resources for something else. So what is your plan?
So we're looking at both, right? I mean, and rightly, as you rightly said, right? The RPA is mainly the backend that we use, is to automate and expedite the process that we have. So we work with a couple of banks, and then we have a lot of transactions that we kind of send, settle, and all. Now, RPA definitely helps us. So it's like, compared to human, like the amount of time an activity can be performed, and can be expedited is far more higher than human. So that's something at the backend that we're doing. And the front end, like, when talking about customer facing, then we're looking at the bots, mainly for the customer interactions. right? And then we have AI engine in between, wherein we're looking at like all the customer interactions to understand the customer behavior, the kind of service requests that they have, and then start building products accordingly. So that is something that we're doing. So there are two sides of it. The front end customer facing bots, and then you have RPAs at the back end to automate the process.
All right. The penultimate question is that budgeting is becoming a challenge now, and challenge is going to be stiffer going forward. I think. What is my sense? That's my own perception. Your might be different. Are you also facing the same kind of thing? Challenge of budget, bringing budget from your CFOs or the management? If so, how are you managing? Because you are into so many of projects which requires a certain budget for you. Are you facing the similar challenge as well? If not, how are you managing it? People are saying that do more with the less. That's the catchword these days. Yeah.
You're right. I mean, you're right. And this is what the expectations are, right? I mean, the moment you sit back and you talk about projects, everyone likes it, but then at what cost? And that's really the decision maker at times. But yes, I mean, the expectation is do more and less cost, and it's possible. To be honest, it's possible. See, the thing is, there is an ROI. So when you talk about a business, right? So if I want to do an RPA, for example, there's a clear ROI on that one. Why am I doing it, and how much I'm going to save out of it, right? That's one thing. It's from a saving perspective. But then if I am using bots for the customer interaction, then I'm creating more customer experience, and that's again another ROI. Okay, that's one thing. So I believe it's possible. I don't think a budget is a constraint, to be very honest, with any business who wants to grow, right? If the business doesn't want to invest right now, then I think they cannot sustain for long. This is one thing, right? So there are three ways of doing it, right? One is like, you create an ROI, saving how much are you going to save by doing a project, okay, or how much revenue can you generate by doing a project. And in security front, and security is more like insurance, right? You spend, but you just hope you don't use it, right? So this thing, and when it comes to security, then you talk about how much you're going to lose if you don't invest, right? So the three ways of doing it, right? And I believe the business understands all the three, right? It's just like, what are you going to communicate to them? Like, so are you just going to say I'm doing RPA and you're going to invest this much? It doesn't make sense, right? It's a business value, that you need to create. So every project should create a business value. Either you are gaining it, you're saving it, or you're avoiding the loss, right? This is how it is.
What is the kind of advice you have for peer group or the people who wants to fit into your shoes, becoming CIOs or senior leaders or decision-making positions?
I think one of the thing I would say is like, focus on the customers. That's very important, because, people don't buy technology. People buy solutions. People buy services. They don't buy technology. Nobody buys technology, right? Even a normal person or a CIO, whoever goes. The thing is, the moment you start focusing on the customer needs, right? And if you go back from customer to the business, we are able to kind of, bring the right solutions. Today, CIO is a very active player in business. They sit very closely with CEO, right? And that's what it is, because, the business today are enabled or run by technology, right? That's a platform, right? What we do is build solutions on top of that can help the business. So if you start focusing on what the customer needs are, right, and then you start developing solutions, products, and presenting that to the management, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because today, a CIO who's looking only at technology, it's not required anymore. Why? Because the moment you go on a private cloud and all, right, the role of technology is not there. Okay, because there's somebody else who can do it. The role of CIO is to work closely with business, right? So focus on business, focus on what the customer needs, focus on what the processes are within the organization and how we can enhance those processes, right? Using certain solutions, using some services. And this is what it is. And talk business. Don't talk technology. Don't talk, all that big jargon that we talk about blockchain and all, right? I mean, nobody cares about that. People care about business, right? As CIO, you should know what the business is all about. You should know what the compliance does. You should know what finance does, how the operation works. And if you know all that, then you can really add value to it, right? Just knowing technology doesn't help.
All right. Thank you very much, Shafique. As usual, pleasure talking to you. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice talking to you, Sanjay. And it's always a pleasure. Thank you very much.